Good afternoon, my name is Dominic and I will be your host today for my MBA 622 project for Organizational and Behavior Management. And my project will be called My Summative Blog Reflection, and it's for the Dr. Stephen Edelson. During these previous 8 weeks, I have been asked to reflect on the various topics that our professor has given to us, reflecting on issues of management and organizational behavior. Fellow students in our class were asked to provide me with feedback, so I would be able to integrate that along with what I've learned to be able to learn from their reflections as well. Therefore, I have learned so much about organizational management, psychology, and communication in the workplace. Now, along with these 8 topics that we have done, they've concerned everything from management styles, my inherent personality and character traits, motivation, or basically what motivates me, organization and intercultural communication in the workplace, group project preferences, and differences between teamwork and group work. In this course, we've been asked to discuss both personal and professional issues dealing with organizational topics, which basically dealt with values, culture, and people in the workplace. The managerial and communication theories that we have learned in this class also tie directly into my workplace, which is a pharmacy drugstore. On a daily basis, I work in a clinical mental health pharmacy, where I actually get to direct both pharmacists and technicians alike. That's why I feel these questions were very good for me, because they made me deal with the issues that I have to face on a daily basis. When asked what was my preferred management style, I always felt that the contingency theory applies the most appealingly for me, because you can use it in any situation. Because even like my dad always taught me, that in the real world, every situation presents itself in a different way, shape, or form. So you can't exactly just expect to use one theory or one size fits all for every situation that comes up. So moving on, the next question was, how do I want to be managed? Which is a very good question, because it actually makes you think from your point of view. So basically the way I would want to be managed is that I would want my manager to be fair to everyone and to be objective. Also, I feel that you have to schedule everyone fairly and rotate between all jobs. That way, no one person becomes specialized in one area, but everyone knows everything. Which leads me to my next point of cross-training. I feel that you have to cross-train, because in the absence of someone, what do you do if you just have one person with that one position? That way, everyone knows the position. They may not be the best at it, but they know how to fill in, just in case, if someone else isn't there. So for example, if I were a new employee, I would want my manager to have empathy on my situation and understand that I'm learning the ropes. Also, as a manager, you probably would want to keep your feelings about your other employees to yourself, because in my experience, usually it gets out even if the manager says something in confidence to another employee. So you never can really tell. But one thing with me, in all my situations, I always try to practice the golden rule, which only means is that I treat others the way I would expect them to treat me. The next part of the question was, do you have any differences in the way that you would expect a manager to behave versus a subordinate? And of course, the answer is yes. As a manager, you would hope that they would maintain what they consider to be an open door policy, which is basically anyone in the department, the employee, even the managers themselves, can go to the director with any kind of complaints or issues that they have. So that way they know that their voice will be heard. But also, as a manager, I think it's important not to micromanage your own employees. Because I know as being an employee, it makes you nervous when you always know that your manager doesn't trust you enough that they're looking behind your back all the time. So you want to be able to instill some trustworthiness and to know that your employees feel that you trust them, which actually promotes more camaraderie. And another thing that I liked about these questions is that it forced me to reflect on my own real-world experience. So in my world, in Dom's world, it's the pharmacy, it's the drugstore. That's my ground zero. So what are some of the things that I deal with on a daily basis that replies to these questions? Well, basically it would be disputes between technicians. Sometimes one technician may feel that another technician is picking on them. So you kind of have to remind each other that they have to treat each other with respect. And a lot of times, I'll actually sit down with them one-on-one and try to coach them, tell them what I think would be good or bad. Then I actually allow them to come together then to see if they can actually format a plan together that will allow them to coexist in the same work environment. Management is more of an art than a science. Really, there's no one right way to manage people. That's why I feel when you're a manager, you have to be more subjective than objective. Sometimes you can't always go by the book. You have to improvise as you go along. One thing I always try to do though is, let's say an employee is caught doing something they're not supposed to do. I always, depending on what they do, try not to penalize them first. I try to take it from their point of view and leave them to find out what they actually did on their own that was wrong. That way they take responsibility for what they're doing because they've now realized what they did. And they can actually make a plan of attack to overcome whatever it is that they did. The next question, which really made me introspect on myself, which was basically we took the Big Five personality test. So it revealed some things that I was trying to deny. So I like how it actually made me kind of fess up to who I am and what I can do to actually become better as a manager. So one of the first 5 dimensions was that how we were open to experience. This is where I kind of disagreed with the test because it said that I wasn't very open to new experiences. But I feel I am, because that's why I like being a pharmacist. Every day is a new experience with customers and new drugs. But also, it said in conscientiousness was that I'm almost like in between being organized and disorganized. So I have a little bit of both. So I could still say I'm a little organized, but I think I can do that a little bit better. Another thing was that the test revealed that I was very agreeable and very amicable, which I can see I'm very agreeable with people. Then on the 4th dimension, it said I was very extroverted, meaning that I like to be stimulated by others, and I enjoy their company and their conversation, which I think is pretty true. And then with neuroticism, like I said, I'm very anxious and sensitive to things. But that's one thing I could probably work on, so. Now on to our next question, which was, did we have any type of managerial misperceptions? One time, I didn't actually stick up for the director when the staff pharmacist who was on duty told me to do something that contradicted what my pharmacy director and policies had told me to do. And at the time, I was an intern, and I was afraid of looking incompetent. So of course, I didn't want to say anything. Plus I was unsure of myself, so I just went along with what the staff pharmacist had told me to do. So as my director came and told me, he said, well, Dom, who's your boss here? Is it the staff pharmacist or me? But when I told him the conflict of interest, he said, well, what you have to do is even though you may be just an intern or a technician or whoever, even the janitor, you have to make sure that you stand up for the departmental policies, because that's what you're here for. In the absence of the manager, you're there to be the manager's advocate for advice on things. So what I learned was from this is that even if a staff pharmacist had told me to do otherwise, I should have stood up to him or her and told them what the departmental policies were. Another important question that I liked that really made me learn a lot about myself and my managerial style is when we were asked, well, what motivates me as a manager or an employee? Well, to my surprise, when I looked at it, I thought, wait a second, I'm not motivated by money or a pay raise, because when I was working at my past position, I was actually complimented from my boss and customers. And I think when you receive a compliment from either your coworkers or your customers, it really makes you feel good, because then you know that, oh, I think I'm doing good, but now I actually know it as well. So that was a really good motivator. Another thing was when my boss actually allowed me to not just go and count 30 pills per day. He actually allowed me to go outside from the pharmacy counter to actually counsel patients and to perform disease state management counseling. I really appreciated that because it allowed me to use my drug knowledge. So I was being used more than just a filling robot. So the question is, what can I take from this? Well, as a manager, this forced me to realize that monetary gains are okay, but what really motivates an employee, as it motivated me, was rewarding someone with either knowledge, self-confidence, or a sense of self-achievement. Another important question that we learned was about how do you deal with Theory X versus Theory Y managers, and how do we actually see ourselves? So in my life, of course, I've dealt with both. But before you can discuss any of this, I've always been taught that your interpersonal relationships really dictate the quality of your life. So really, if you don't have good relationships with people, you really don't have a good life. So that's why it's so important that you have to develop a positive relationship with people, even when they either turn their back on you or make you feel upset. So the more positive, like I said, the type of relationship that you have with your employees, if they actually happen to misinterpret something you said, the more they're going to give you the benefit of the doubt. And that happens used with more Theory Y type of managers. If you're a Theory X manager and you're more authoritarian and your employees don't have such a good rapport with you, if they actually misinterpret your message, psychologically speaking, they're going to automatically associate something negative with that, even if you didn't mean it to be that way. So that's why I'm saying that psychology underlies everything we do in management. So the question is, what did I learn out of all this? Well, what I learned is I want to be both a Theory X and a Theory Y manager. Although I'd prefer to be more Theory Y, there are some times that you have to use the Theory X. Because, of course, you want it to be able to instill leadership and loyalty in your employees because you're a Theory Y manager, because they know that you trust them. You don't have to micromanage them. On the other hand, though, like I said, you don't want to be their buddy-buddy, and you do have to give commands sometimes. So you do have to be a little bit of Theory X as well. That's why I say, even with the contingency theory, that there isn't any one perfect way of doing everything at one point in time, because it's not life. Life is imperfect. But the one perfect thing I always try to strive for is that I think your actions speak louder than your words. Words deceive, actions don't. If people know that they can match your actions up to your words, then they trust you because they know that you've developed a rapport with them and you know that you mean what you say. So there's another thing that we have to not ignore is that the immense global activity that's now occurring and trickling into the American economy. So one of the things we had to discuss was how do we deal with intercultural communication? Well, my answer to that is that basically you use the same tenets of good communication. But since you're dealing with someone from an international culture, you actually have to show them some empathy. Because usually, if the person that you're trying to deal with has an open mind, and you're open to them as well, that'll feed off each other. And people will understand what you're trying to say, and they'll actually give you a second chance with them, because they know that you're having probably just as much of a hard time trying to talk to them as they are trying to communicate with you. So, I mean, it goes both ways. But then one thing you have to deal, though, is that even if they do have a custom that might be different against your cultures and values, you can't show that to them. You have to remain open. And after a while, you'll learn how to respect their different customs and values. So with different people from different cultures, once they realize that you're communicating with them, they'll be more open to you. One thing I found out, though, that the more you speak with them in their own language, or at least you try to actually find out more about their culture, they'll appreciate that. And then they'll open up more to you. So I think that from a managerial perspective, what do I take from this? Is that you have to be open to new cultures. I mean, I don't care who you are, I'd say in the next 15 or 20 years, you're probably going to have someone from India or Pakistan or even from the Middle East in your department. So you have to be sensitive to that. Because as I said before, when you're a manager, when you work, it's almost your work becomes your work family. So in order to have a good functioning family, you have to make sure that everyone feels that they're accepted. Now, one of the most challenging questions that I had to add for this semester was probably when we had to deal with groups versus individual projects. I'm more of a group person, so I like working in groups, just because I always feel that when you have a group, you have a free-flowing exchange of ideas, because there's something that someone else will think that I didn't think of, and vice versa. There's probably something that I'll think that they didn't think of. So I think when you're in a group, you actually gain a synergistic perspective on stuff. Of all the questions, this is probably what taught me the most, is how to actually deal with being in a group. The question was, what's the difference between teamwork and group work? Well, of course, not to rehash all that out. But I felt our group project for this class was a great example of what a group was versus a team. I mean, in one word, like I said in my report, is that teamwork is one word, whereas group work is two words in the English language. So you can kind of say that symbolizes what teamwork versus group work is all about. In a team, you kind of help each other out. You're accountable to everyone, and you actually work towards one goal. Whereas a group could be any body of people. You may be working towards one goal, but not everyone can be the leader. Your work speaks for itself. When you do a project, you can tell if it's just like basically a patchwork of things just put together, or if it's something that really is united and has, like I said before, a united impression of unity. To sum up my presentation this afternoon, we've talked about management styles, my personality traits, management misperceptions that I've learned to correct, what actually motivates me to become a good worker and how to motivate others, also different types of managerial theories, such as type X versus type Y. I've also learned how to be a good intercultural communicator as well, and also whether I prefer group or individual projects, and then also how to actually motivate and to achieve greatness in group work. So we've covered a wide variety of topics in managerial organizational behavior and communication.